This was certainly a lot more fun than the original Tower of Hera, which was pretty bland and boring, especially that floor tile room, but that's not to say it was perfect. First of all, the dungeon is all about using the fling upward switches. Fun idea, but their annoying delay, rather than just fling you up immediately when you walk onto them, gets increasingly grating. But they are fun. It's slightly intuitive which direction they'll send you in addition to sending you upwards, particularly when they're meant to send you left and right. I really love that they take advantage of the raised elevation of the blue and red blocks, and you can use the wall fusing to progress on top of them accordingly. The problem is that this requires you to walk along these narrow block rows that the sensitive controls of the circle pad don't go well with walking along narrow pathways, as you'll see in this game. At first I liked getting to go outside the tower in the dungeon, being on the platforms moving around it. But then I realized these outside sections are the most excruciatingly boring part of the dungeon. All you do is waiting. It's the marble zone of this game. At least they try to shake it up the next time by having you dodge moving traps, but still. The only exciting part is fusing with the walls and rising blocks to progress upwards, which is certainly a lot more interesting than just walking up a normal staircase like in the original. I don't really like getting the big key from a big chest instead of getting a dungeon item from it. Maybe they should have two differently colored big chests. Something definitely improved about this game is that a special, if generic, theme plays when you have to beat all the enemies in a room to progress. That way, it doesn't risk being unintuitive, not knowing that you're supposed to beat all the enemies to get out instead of like hitting a switch. But most of the time, isn't it already obvious you have to defeat all the enemies without removing the superior dungeon music to tell you? How else would you progress? This is also the first appearance of the Selphos that annoyingly hop backwards when you attack them in this game, as opposed to them first appearing in the Eastern Palace like in the original. But this is good because, as it turns out, you can stun them with a hammer, which you're encouraged to use in the Eternals, so you're gonna find out eventually. So they're not a problem anymore. I like the fact that you can break the floor with the hammer to have a way to progress down the floor. Again, it's more interesting than a staircase. And it's nice being rewarded for remembering the level design below you, breaking the floor above it to fall. Why do I have to wait so long on the rising platforms before they rise? More importantly, why bring back the tiles that fly at you from the floor? I was about to compliment the dungeon on not having the most excruciatingly boring part of the original. And what's worse is that no longer does the same strategy work where you stick out your sword and the floor tiles hit them, like would be logical. Instead, it doesn't work, and you have to tediously mash the B button instead. I just found out from this footage that you can use your shield to block the flying tiles. But first of all, I didn't have a shield up to that point when I played because I never bothered getting the shield. Because you have to stop and hold a button for it to actually do anything. So it's pace breaking. So I never had a shield at that point in the game. And second, it's not intuitive that the shield can block the flying tiles because they never did that in any other game. At the very least, the floor tile challenge doesn't take nearly as much of your time, but it shouldn't have been in the game to begin with. It was the most tedious part of the original game to begin with. The parts of the original I always dread going back to even more than any dungeon in the game. The dungeon's fairy fountain is a place you're naturally led into rather than you having to go out of your way to fall into a certain pit to get to it like in the original. And it's especially nice because I had a bottle with no fairy at the time. The boss is certainly easier than the original game's equivalent. It doesn't restore all its health if it knocks you down off the arena for one thing. It also interestingly turns increasingly more red when you get its health down. It moves around more slowly and smoothly, so it's less luck-based attacking its tail. I feel like if the hammer stuns it, it should stun it from a larger distance rather than having you drastically slow yourself down trying to hammer its tail and get hit a lot more. The boss deals greater Castlevania knockback to you the more hurt it is, and knockback is always annoying in this game because while the original did have it, it was never to the obnoxious extent as this game at its worst. I beat the insultingly easier than the original's boss, and at least it's not a massive difficulty spike this time. I probably felt stupid at how I was so distracted multitasking that I got the pendant getting warped out of the dungeon without getting the heart container, so I had to go all the way back to collect it. I only noticed I didn't collect it when I realized after Zaphalad was done wasting my time being Captain Obvious with stuff I already know, that, oh, I only have 2 hearts left. Shouldn't getting the boss's heart container restore all my health? The Lost Woods is another example of how modernization of A Link to the Past sucked. Part of what I love about the original is its simplicity. You start the file, now immediately go to the castle and save Zelda through the sewers. No forced intro cutscene that tells you all about the backstory of the game when the maidens will already tell that to you, unless you're playing the GBA version. And no forced tutorials whatsoever. You want to save? Then just press select. You got all the pendants? There! Now go to the forest and get the sword. You don't need an old man telling you that you have to go there. You don't need a tedious extra challenge when you already proved yourself by getting the pendants. In this game, once you get to the woods, you have to follow the ghosts. That's fun at first until the 3rd time, when I was driven to tears from frustration and not knowing what the fuck to do the first time I played the game. I had to look up a guide, and somehow I was supposed to know about the absolute moon logic that in order to progress, I had to go back the way I came from. Then what was the point of the second trial if I just had to go back from it anyways? Because of that, I had to look up a guide to progress, and because of that, the Lost Woods will always have a permanent black mark to me as a tedious part of the game, even though it's fine if you know what to do. And again, this game being a homage to another game is to its detriment once again, because it just makes it all the more clear this challenge was unnecessary and makes me wish I was playing the original.